DeSantis, I swear you need to run for office in 2024. At this point, I will vote for you in a heartbeat. For those of you who don't know, Florida has just done something fantastic. For those of you who've been on Twitter, I'm pretty sure you've seen critical race theory actually is trending right now on Twitter, right? And the reason is because Florida has officially banned critical race theory from its public schools, which is fantastic news, right? For all of us who actually really like real history and not just historical fiction like the 1619 Project, this is fantastic news because there's no longer trying to indoctrinate children, of course, into, for one, hating themselves, or if they're a minority, thinking themselves as a victim strictly because of the color of their skin. This is fantastic news for all those who live in Florida. I know me and my wife, we're looking at moving our family over to Tennessee, but I'll be honest, Florida's looking a little better right now. Florida's looking pretty good. Hopefully Tennessee might take some cues from DeSantis, because right now DeSantis is killing it. He is absolutely killing it. There's a part of me that might not want him to run for office because what happens to Florida when he leaves, right? He has shown what strong leadership can do from a governor point of view, right? And we need more strong governors like him who will reject the lockdowns as they happened, as well as do stuff like this, banning critical race theory from schools. So right now we have an article from the AP. Florida bans critical race theory from its classrooms. So, Florida State Board of Education banned critical race theory from public school classrooms Thursday, adopting a new rule it said would shield school children from a curriculum that could distort historical events. It does distort historical events. It distorts them to such a crazy degree. For those of you who haven't read anything involving critical race theory, it is just bizarre on how much historical facts they toss out the window to instead replace with pure speculation, and in some instances, just pure falsehoods, right? So I just recently bought a book by one of critical race theory's, I guess, biggest defenders that I could get recommended from people who I know on the left who still believe in things like critical race theory. So I hopefully sometime in the near future will be doing a couple videos kind of breaking down some of their theories, I guess, and some of what they believe, and just so you can see how insane this stuff really is. So if that interests you, please make sure, of course, you just subscribe to the channel. That'll probably be out in a couple weeks. I'm getting the book this Sunday, so we'll go through that eventually. But I'm telling you, it distorts historical events to such a crazy degree. Florida's move was widely expected as the national debate intensifies on how race should be used as a lens in the classroom to examine the country's tumultuous history. And here's the thing. In a way, we do have a tumultuous history, right? We've done a lot of bad, but we've also done a lot of good. A ton of good. All countries have done bad. There's not a country out there that hasn't done anything bad, right? People like to point out to even the Native Americans. Guess what? Look at what they were doing to each other before we got here. Awful. I mean, cannibalism, slavery, just terrible, mass slaughter. Just awful, awful things. Not to justify what we did, but just to point out, history is not, isn't exactly all, sunshines and rainbow, right? It's bad. It's bad. There's a lot of bad in history. The way we judge people in history is not through a lens of what our moralities are today, but we look at, did they move that moral compass more true north, right? Did they move that compass more true north? And America has consistently done that time and time again. We had slavery, yes. Guess what? We got rid of it at one of the few countries that have gotten rid of slavery as fast as we got rid of slavery. And a big reason for that is because in our founding documents, it laid the framework to be able to free the slaves in the first place. This idea that we should be treated as individuals and not part of a collective. That is what's freed the slaves more than anything else. Well, unless you're a libertarian, in which case you probably believe more so the Industrial Revolution also freed the slaves, which there's some truth in that. It definitely is. But there was a moral awakening already happening during the founding of our country, which is why they laid the framework that allowed the slaves to be freed, right? The critical race theory people will point to things like the fact that slaves in the South were considered was like a 3/4 a person or 3/5 a person. That was the whole point, though, was to free the slaves, because if they were considered a whole person, guess what? That would have gave the South more representatives in Congress. It would have given them more representation in Congress, not less. So the anti-slavers, they wanted them to not count as a full person. That way the South had less power in Congress, That way they could eventually free slaves. Critical race theory turns that on its head, saying, oh no, they just didn't view them as full people, which is complete lunacy, and anyone who knows anything about history will realize how ignorant of a statement that truly is. But many people who buy into critical race theory believe things just like that, right? So this idea that, it has distorted history is completely true. But the thing is, they're also now trying to point out the fact if you oppose critical race theory, you oppose looking at our tumultuous history. Now, I'll be honest, I oppose critical race theory, and I think we should heavily look at the things we've done wrong because it's important. We need to know what we did wrong. We have to improve from that. And we should also be grateful for those who helped, again, move that moral compass more true north, who helped free the slaves. Yes, Abraham Lincoln was not a perfect man. Yes, in a way, he was kind of what we would still consider a racist to this day. But he also did help free the slaves. He helped move our moral compass more true north, right? We have to look at it through that kind of lens. You can't look at history and do the morals of today. If we do that, guess what? When 300 years from now, people are going to look back at us and think we were monsters, right? We can only do the best we can in the time we live in. That's an important thing we must realize when it comes to history. And many people in the past have done so many good things to help move us to where we are today. We should respect that, not point out every little flaw they ever had. We can acknowledge the flaws they had, but we should respect them for what they did right. And we should point to let our children know this is what they did. This is what was great about them. This is what they did well. What can we do in today's society that can, resemble these positive attributes? Not let's tear them down. Let's take them down. It is a terrible philosophy. It's one of those things that I think those who study history get really kind of irritated at when people want to judge those in history based on the morals of today, which is a lot of what critical race theory does. So, Governor Ron Desantis appeared by video at the top of the board's meeting, urging many members, many of whom he appointed, they got through that, of course, to adopt a new measure he asserted would serve students with the facts rather than trying to indoctrinate them with ideology. Thank you, DeSantis. Thank you, DeSantis, for pointing out the fact that schools do nothing but try to indoctrinate them with ideology, because Lord knows that is the truth. All of us who went through public school knows what happens when you try to step out of line with anything they consider this is the truth and you have no ability to fight that, right? You'll get given topics for papers where you're not allowed to oppose that point of view a lot of times, or if you do dare oppose it, you run a risk of making your teacher somewhat angry, and of course your grades are kind of based on what they want to give you when it comes to some of these, when it comes to papers at least, right? The schools indoctrinate children. They just do. They just flat out do. And it'll never end, which is why the Department of Education should be banned. It should never be a federal institute in the first place. But what they're doing right now, banning critical race theory from classrooms, is a fantastic step that we have to go in, where we at least acknowledge the fact that the schools have been trying to do this, right? It is a fantastic step here, and it's going to be great, of course, for all those who are in Florida, and hopefully will set him up on a better step here to run for president in 2024. Again, fingers crossed. The Black Lives Matter movement has helped bring continuous discussions about race to the forefront of American discourse, and classrooms have become the battleground. That already is an issue. All right, they should not be talking about any of that in the school in the first place at this time. Supporters contend that federal law has preserved the unequal treatment of people on the basis of race, and the country was founded on the theft of land and labor. Oh God, this old nonsense again. Theft of land. We didn't steal land, by the way. We conquered land. All right, guess what? The Comanche conquered tons of land. The Cherokee conquered tons of land. Everyone conquers land. You won't point to a single society on the face of the earth that did not conquer their land. You know how hard it would be to actually find the true original owners of any land anywhere on the earth? All right, it's not going to happen. Everyone conquered land. So if you want to, people can say, well, we should give it back to a Cherokee. Well, should the Cherokee give it back to the people who they conquered? All right, it's just a stupid ideology. It makes no sense at all. The theft of labor as well. Yes, we had slavery. Guess what? Slavery wasn't very efficient. It really wasn't. All right, the North outdid the South on almost all fronts. Fortunately, during the war, right? It really, slavery is not an efficient system. It just isn't, especially when you had the advancement of machines as well as what we realized free labor could really do. When we actually had capitalism, we realize slavery is ineffective. It doesn't work. It's a terrible, terrible system, not just morally, but also just intellectually. It just doesn't make sense. People work better when they're working for themselves, right? So, you could say we're founded, they say founded under the theft of land and labor. No, what we're founded on is the ideology of individual rights that led to the destruction of slavery, which led to the destruction of, institutional racism, because there isn't any institutional racism anymore against minorities of this country. They can say there is as much as they want. The reality is they get special benefit when applying for colleges. If anything, that there's actually institutional racism against the majority, not the minority, at this point in American history. But we're not founded under the theft of land or labor. We're founded under certain ideological values which value the individual over the collective, which is in complete opposition to a thing that they're trying to push here. Opponents of critical race theory say school children should not be taught that America is fundamentally racist. Very true. It shouldn't be taught that because, again, we're founded under the ideas of individuality, not collectivism. Racism is a collectivist sort of viewpoint. Governors and legislators in the Republican-led states around the country are considering or have signed into law bills that would limit how teachers can frame American history. Yes, as they should. 100%. Both sides have accused the other of politicizing the classroom instructions and violating the free speech rights of countless people by limiting allowable points of view. The government has no right to free speech. School teachers have no right in the classroom to teach whatever they want. That's not what freedom of speech means. Freedom of speech is for the people, not for the government. All right? If I don't want the government telling my kids something, the government shouldn't be telling my kids something. Because here's the thing. The government is the one that's allowed to point a gun to our head and say, you must do X or else. The people can't do that. That's why the people have the right to freedom of speech. The government does not have that right. They are the government. All right? This idea that, banning critical race theory is banning freedom of speech. No, if a student wants to talk about critical race theory, they have a right to talk about critical race theory. The school should deal in facts, however, not fiction. All right, if a kid wants to say, hey, you know what, I believe in critical race theory and here's why, they have every right to do it. Any school that suspends a student for talking about critical race theory, I oppose, because we have freedom of speech, and I think that does apply to students in school. They must be allowed to speak freely when it comes to their opinions. But the school has no right to force an ideology down children, right? Or onto children. And they talk about, well, it's violating the free speech rights of countless people by limiting the allowable points of view. But critical race theory disallows the point of view that America is a great country founded under individual rights over the idea of, America's a terrible country founded under ideas of slavery. It still limits a point of view regardless of how you look at it. So it's a complete bogus point of view in the first place. Florida law already requires schools to provide instruction on a host of fundamentals, including the Declaration of Independence, the Holocaust, the African American history, but the topics have often been muddled. Current events, including the killing of black people by police, have intensified the debates. You know what? Schools should teach about it. They should teach about the fact that only 12 to 15 black men were actually unarmed black men were even killed in 2019 alone by the FBI stats. So it's actually not as high as what the media wants you to believe in the first place. That actually, when you look at white unarmed deaths versus black unarmed deaths, they're actually right in line even when counting for population. It's actually very, very close. So I'm not going to go through this entire article because really, for the most part, this entire article is going in where, of course, they're trying to oppose mostly them banning critical race theory more than anything else. But it is worth noticing here that more and more states have started to ban critical race theory, right? More and more states have started to actually realize how terrible this is. More parents are standing up day after day when it comes to what the left is pushing in our schools. You've seen story after story of not just white parents either, but black parents saying this critical race theory is teaching my kid that they can't amount to anything without the help of white people. It's awful ideology. It really is. It's telling black children that they're forever disadvantaged when we should be trying to uplift them. We should be telling them, no, you can accomplish anything. We live in a great country. Work hard. Don't let anyone tell you no. We should be telling black kids, yes, guess what? There might be racism out there. There is racism out there, all right? There is racist out there. But don't let them stop you. You have what it takes to succeed. Prove them wrong, right? That should be the message we're teaching these kids, not, oh, well, this country's racist, terrible, and you'll never amount to anything, and there's no way you can ever hope to prevail unless we make complete changes at the federal level, and because kids don't have control over these things. You got to put this in perspective of something the kid can have control over if they want to be able to grow. All right? If you're a kid in school and these people are telling you you'll never amount to anything until laws change at the federal level as well as state levels, what are you going to do? What's the point in trying? What's the point of even doing anything? Because you can't impact that, right? You can only impact yourself to a certain level, right? You can only impact what's immediately around you. And then later in life, you can grow and hopefully have a bigger and bigger reach. But the first thing we should be telling these kids is not, you have to have, there has to be a change in society before you can ever succeed. We should be telling them, no. Look at yourself. What can you improve in yourself today? What can you do to make yourself better? And in turn, that will help make the world better. We should be uplifting kids, not bringing them down. And it's bringing these kids down on multiple levels. I mean, again, telling black people that they're victims no matter who they are or where they're from. Telling white people that they're oppressors because of the sins of the father, of course. Absolutely ridiculous ideology that typically we would toss out instantly. That's now been pushed back in. And one of my biggest concerns actually has less to do with the immediate problems with critical race theory, but there's a long-term problem I don't think people are realizing. And that is how many white children are being told they're worthless, they're terrible, their race defines them. And then how many of those children are going to sit there and take it? And what I mean by that is how many of them are probably going to turn around and say, you know what? White people are pretty great. And then what are they going to do? They start identifying with their white race. They start identifying by the color of their skin. You're raising a whole generation of future racists by doing this because you're telling these kids from an early age, race defines you. And when you tell a bunch of white kids your race defines you, and by the way, you're terrible, do you think they're going to sit down and just take it? No, they're still going to abide by those rules of viewing things based on race. But what they're going to do is they're going to frame instead, no, white people are great and everyone else is terrible. That's also a wrong ideology. We do not want that to spread. We do not want that to happen. Or I don't want my son thinking anything less of anyone because of the color of their skin. I never want that to happen. Part of the reason why we're not putting them in public schools. But when you teach kids to look things through the lens of race, what's going to happen is you're not only going to have a bunch of black kids and white kids separated on that front now who are just, basically butting heads constantly. You're raising a whole generation of racists on both sides. And that's dangerous. That is terribly, as regressive as can be. They're pulling kids back over to the 50s in a way. We got past this. A lot of us who grew up in the 90s and early 2000s, we never cared that much about race. We just thought it was stupid. A lot of us didn't even understand how this is even a thing. Why do we even care? Oh my God, you're more tan than I am. Oh, good Lord, what am I going to do? No, that's stupid. It makes no sense. A lot of us who were born in the 90s, who went through, of course, like stuff like South Park, that had the whole episode of why hate crimes are absolutely ridiculous, right? We understand there's a difference, but for the most part, we didn't care about race. But now we're raising a whole generation of kids to care about race. So I can say is I'm not raising my kid to care about race. I have a lot of friends of a bunch of different races. Guess what? He's going to see them all. He's not going to look at them any different than he looks at anyone else. Because we're not going to teach this terrible critical race theory garbage. We're going to just teach them, hey, we're going to teach them Christian values, to be honest. We're going to teach, that's the big thing, right? Me and my family are Christians. As far as we're concerned, we're all brothers and sisters in Christ, right? It doesn't matter the color of our skin. You could you come over from, I could go to China right now and run to a random guy over there, and to him, or to me at least, he's still a brother in Christ, right? It doesn't matter where he's from. It doesn't matter what he believes. It doesn't matter about anything like that for the most part. He's still a brother or sister in Christ. It doesn't matter. And that's why I hope to raise my children, with those values, so that they don't look at anyone as lesser because of any other immutable quality they can't change about themselves. We have to get to a point where we actually realize there's only one race. There's a human race. I know that's really, cliche, but it's true. It really is true. And until we get to that, we will never, ever, get over the ideas of racism. We have to get to this idea that we are all just one race, we're the human race, before we have to get to a colorblind society. And unfortunately, critical race theory says colorblind societies are evil, they're destructive, they don't believe in the idea of being a colorblind society. We have to break down these ideas of critical race theory so we understand why they're wrong, and so we can get back on track with moving that moral compass more true north. But what do you think? Do you think DeSantis should run for office in 2024? Do you think we should be banning critical race theory from all of our schools? Leave a comment below, let us know, of course, as well as if you've enjoyed this video, please make sure you leave a like. And like I said before, we'll be doing a full breakdown of critical race theory, of one of their main books they point to, probably here in the next couple weeks. So if you want to see that, make sure you subscribe to the channel to see more, and we'll be seeing you again real soon.